Hello, and on the bench today we have two banjo players, hence the reference to Dueling Banjos. And if you remember the film Deliverance, that's where it all comes from, where there's a little kid up on a bridge, and there's four guys in the kayaks travelling down the river, and they have a banjo session, dueling banjos, between one of them in the boat and the little kid on the bridge. Anyway, that's beside the point. I wouldn't normally work on something like this, but it was intriguing to see if I could get it working, get them working, that is. And I had to do a major autopsy on them, as you can see. Whether they'll ever go back together in one piece is another matter. If I got them apart, I should be able to put them back together. So initially I was mystified, because if you look down there, that's the what appears to be the only battery compartment, and there is a position for a switch to turn it on and off, but there's no switch, and I know there's never ever been a switch in there, and there's no wires hanging off inside. So how do you turn the thing on and off? That was the mystery, and I'll come on to that later. But I was sort of poking around, and I stuck voltage across here, 3 AAs, so 4.5 volts. No response whatsoever. I had no idea how you turned it on. That's the main problem. But I did check the motor here, which moves this bit, which moves his head around, obviously, or body possibly, because I haven't put it back together yet to try it, but it does work. And the motor was open circuit, basically. So that was the first job. I got the motor out, not too hard, took it to pieces, and one of the brushes was completely bent, so bent it back together in the right place and put the motor back together, and it worked. So that was fine, but I still was no clearer as to how this thing worked. I mean, there's wires that go from this part here, and there's nothing complicated in this half at all. But there's a few wires that go through the connecting feet to this other unit. I'd assume there's probably some sort of circuit board in this one with the microprocessor and whatever in it that controls the whole system. And so it was more difficult to get this one apart, because he had what do you call it, not overalls, dungarees on. That's a word from my past, dungaree. So he had dungarees on, but I didn't really think the base would come apart, but it did. And what do I find? Another set of AA holder. So, and a lot of rusty old batteries, which I think I've thrown away, because they've probably been in there since it was first made. And so then what I tried was I put 4.5 volts on this one, and also 4.5 volts on this one, completely separated. Although there is a common earth, the negatives are common. The positives, strangely enough, do not seem to be common. But we'll get onto that later. Now, I noticed some yellow wires here, which go up inside. Haha, I thought, there's got to be something in here. And they go right into this foot. So there's got to be a switch. And I couldn't really pull anything out without wrecking it completely to see what was in there. but that's what it appears to be. And I'll give you a quick test now. What I found though is if I connect this positive on this set of battery holders over to this one here, it will appear to work, even though if you bleep them out there is no connection normally. So if I press his foot, and press his foot again, because I don't want you to get too excited. And what is also interesting is, not only does this one move when the sound comes out of that little speaker there, but there's another speaker in this one, and when this one moves the sound comes out of this one. But that's another story. I'm working on this now, which is the other motor. Now this motor tested fine, and when I put some power on it, it was revolving, but it was all oily. The cog was slipping because there seems vast quantities of oil all over it. Strange. And so I give it a good clean off with alcohol and super glued the cog back on. So I'm now going to put this back in and try and get these poor disemboweled banjo players back to some state of normality again. And they're quite well put together, to be honest. But oh yeah, and what we've got here is a lot of circuitry, which will be, if I can get into that, we've got one little tiny board here with a blob on it where my finger is, and that'll be the control unit microprocessor, and it'll store all that music. And then we've got other stuff here which is just going to be motor drivers probably, and maybe amplifiers for the speakers. So there you go. And I was trying these yellow wires with the switch on. I wanted to see how they worked, but if you just short them together, oh, it does work. That's interesting. Oh yeah, they do work then, because earlier they weren't, but they are really green and corroded. So it appears to be a normal momentary on switch in his foot over there. Very ingenious, and there's a label on it somewhere. Where's the label? Here it is. It says German Industries Inc. I thought, no, surely it's not made in Germany. Nothing like this is made in Germany, is it? And when I looked further into it, it says made in China. Okay, that's normal. So what am I going to do now? I'm going to put the motor back in. I'm going to do that off camera. Okay, we now got the other motor in. Let's see if they both do what they're supposed to. Sounds good to me. So what have I got to do now? I've got to link the two positives, and the one of the positives comes through and goes onto the circuit board. So I've got to work out which wire that is and short it to the battery positive on this one, and then I've got to restuff it. Okay, I'll go ahead and do the linking wire. Okay, let's do a final test before I restuff it. Yeah, that's working. And I'm also going to include a 5-volt regulator in it, because the guy I'm sort of doing it for want of a better word, he preferred to run on 12 volts on his rinky-dink machine. So I'm going to stick this regulator in the battery compartment and take some wires out through a convenient orifice, and I'm going to try and do that and restuff it all. That's the underside of the battery compartment. 5-volt regulator, just there, running on a 12-volt supply, and with a heatsink on it. It does get quite hot. You're dropping a fair few volts across that regulator. And battery case doesn't really go in, but where's my screw? If I get my screw, I think I can persuade it, even if it's a bit bent. And just got to rearrange their clothing so they don't like to be seen like this. Okay, so they all are back together and sitting comfortably. Oh, I think those straps need to go over his shoulder. Okay, and that was an unbelievable amount of hassle trying to get all that stuff back in. And can you imagine working in a Chinese factory, stuffing these things all day? I suppose after you've done the first 1,000, it's fairly easy. But as usual, I've ended up with a few bits left over. There's the odd screw, and this is interesting. This is what the speaker out of that one. I completely ripped off the connection terminals when I was pulling on the wires too hard. But the success story was I found another speaker, identical in size. It's actually added my old Mr. Carlson's probe. I put it in that one, and it's much better than the original speaker that was in there. What else we got around here? We got a bit of stuffing. Well, they were a bit overweight, a bit more stuffing over here. So now they're on a diet and they're a bit thinner. And yeah, I look at these things and I think we've got millions of years of human evolution, and that's what we've come up with, is things like this, which are going to basically end up in landfill at some point or other after a couple of years. So in some ways I despair, and in some ways it delights me. Oh, the other thing that was missing was the one of them's lost his petticoat, but I'm not sure if he'd be too bothered about that. It's this one, and I can't be bothered to unstuff it again to get that on. I don't think it served particularly any useful purpose. It just covers the plastic box with the gearing in it, and the gears aren't great. Sometimes this one jams up completely and you can't get it to work again without provoking it. And yeah, so I think the final thing to do is to let them play out in full. And remember that film Deliverance when you watch this, if you've seen it, of course, because it's a classic film and doesn't get shown on TV much anymore. So anyway, I let them go ahead and play out.